Well, Samantha, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure once again to be here. Not my first time, but still a thrill. Still haven't got that swim in Portneuf, Joe, but maybe tomorrow morning we might get there. And it's great to be here as somebody interested in economics and policy issues, but also as a civil servant with the privilege of running a government department. And one of the things over the last number of years we're trying to do is encourage the civil service to get out there and engage more in open debate. I think it's very important that occasions like this, people like myself have the opportunity to engage with many people across many different issues. And I've been very interested in some of the commentary over the last few days about the civil service. And I agree with Gary's comments this morning about mistakes that were made during the boom times and before 2008. But also grateful to hear some of the positive comments from people about the capacity of the civil service. And the civil service we have now is a service that we can be proud of, and one that is facing the challenges of the future Brexit and other challenges with confidence, knowing they're difficult, of course, but we're approaching them with confidence. So Joe's question for the exam this afternoon, the exam paper, can our infrastructure cope with Brexit, or cope with Brexit? Is our infrastructure fit for purpose? And I was always told in school you need to read that question carefully in the exam. So I'm going to try answering. I think the first part of it is, what is the quality of our infrastructure now? How well are we doing? Fergal has given a view. Others here will have a different view or perspectives on the quality. But I would say there are elements of our infrastructure that perform very well, other elements that do less well. It's very much a mixed bag. And I think when we're looking at future investment plans and our needs and think about how we invest in the future, we need to have a proper, objective, independent assessment of our infrastructure now. And if you look at a number of different sectors, the energy sectors, gas, electricity, ports, airports, we're doing quite well. Parts of the motorway network, the road network, are performing spectacularly well. We have 900 kilometres of motorway. We had 200 kilometres in 2004. We have more kilometres of motorway per capita than the UK, France or Germany. And people this morning were talking about the lack of planning, and we don't do planning well, and of course we need to do better at planning. But it was an enormous achievement within one generation, in effect, to modernise our road network to the standard that we have now, which in many places performs incredibly well. There are gaps, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But I think we do need to stand back and look at the networks we have and infrastructure in an objective way. Of course, there are particular challenges in health, rural broadband, public transport in our cities, and particularly Dublin. There are major challenges. And the government, in recognising the mixed record in terms of the quality of our infrastructure, are prioritising additional investment. And Pascal Dunn, who tonight will talk in more detail about his plans as Minister. But as Fergal mentioned on the economic statement last week, we're increasing spending significantly. And by 2021, spending will be over 100% the level in 2012, 2013. So we've gone from a capital budget of about 4 billion, just under 4 billion, to almost 8 billion in 2021. A very significant increase, recognising that the economy is recovering and there are needs, and we have resources to increase capital spend. I think it's very important to recognise the existing plans that are in place. The impact of Brexit on infrastructure, the second part of the question that we're debating this afternoon. Of course, the impact is unknown, as we've been debating for the last 2 days. The options go from the continuation of the current relationships, which we all favour and work well for us, to a situation where the UK finds itself falling out of the customs union, of the single market, and we have the so-called hard Brexit. And we agree within the service, my own department, Department of Finance, we agree with the assessment that that would represent a very significant asymmetric shock for this economy. And there's no doubt about it. I think everybody accepts that. What that means for infrastructure, though, and planning is less clear. It will be a significant shock. The immediate impact, of course, will be to reduce the demand for infrastructure. People may have noticed Kevin Toland yesterday, the CEO of Dublin Airport Authority, talking about the 8% decline in passenger numbers from the UK in the first 6 months of the year. So we're already starting to see some of these effects kicking through. So one of the immediate effects could be, in actual fact, a reduction in the demand on some of our infrastructure and networks. But the impacts will vary across the country, and we tend to agree with Fergal's assessment that the impact on Dublin could actually be positive, because Dublin could be a more attractive city for a lot of this mobile investment, particularly in financial services, and the city could actually become more attractive and even grow faster and answer some of the pressures. But of course the agri-food sector will be disproportionately affected in rural areas, and the differential impact of Brexit needs to be considered in the context of our planning. But to take up one of Fergal's comments, What type of infrastructure investment would we put in place to assist those areas deal with the shock of their agri-food sector being badly damaged? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe a better, more sustainable strategy will be to start encouraging or enabling those sectors to diversify away from the UK market, and that's something we can start doing now. That might be more sustainable rather than putting in infrastructure which may not actually provide a significant benefit for sectors and companies that have past relied on the UK market. We would agree the main impact of a hard Brexit scenario on our infrastructure is what Dahi discussed this morning in terms of the impact on the chain, the logistics chain, and that could increase the demand and the requirements on ports in the south very significantly and will have impact on the transport networks to those ports. And that's certainly an area that we're focusing on now and including in our contingency planning. I thought Dahi's comments this morning were well made. And in terms of scenario planning or preparing for the future, I think that's an action we need to focus on now and start preparing for the possibility that those supply chains will be disrupted in a way which will change the logistics requirement on this island. In terms of thinking about the impact of Brexit, and I mentioned diversifying, helping those sectors to diversify away from the UK market, but it's also for us to build up fiscal buffers in the event that there will be a shock in 2019 or 2020. If we really believe there's going to be a shock, what we should be doing now is running policy in a prudent way, running surpluses now, reducing the debt further so that the state is in a position to support demand in the event of a shock hitting the private sector. And that's something that, again, I think the Minister will talk about in his address this evening. In terms of infrastructure, how we fund infrastructure, we fund it through user charges or taxation. People were talking in the past about PPPs and off-balance sheet as if this is free capital. And Fergal mentioned that interest rates are low. They are, but the money is not free. We still have to pay it back. And in our discourse, when we use these expressions, sometimes we give the impression that the tooth fairy is there going to fund infrastructure. It's not. We either fund it from taxation now or in the future, or we pay for user charges now or in the future. There is no other way and there's no magic solution. So therefore, there is a limit on the state's capacity to fund this infrastructure. And as I mentioned, the government have announced plans, a very significant increase in capital, but there's a constraint, and the constraints relate to our financial resources. We disagree with Fergal's assessment that the debt is now low. Our debt is 200 billion. It's one of the highest in the world as per capita, and as a percentage of GNI star, which is a better measure of our capacity, our fiscal capacity, it's about 100%. So it's not the case. We do not accept this view that we should go on a spending splurge or increase in an unsustainable manner on the basis that our debt levels are low. They are not low. They are falling and they're more sustainable, but we still have a debt issue. And therefore, we need to run our affairs in a prudent manner. And one of the issues that I find interesting in discourse, when we talk about our capacity to fund infrastructure, people say we could do more if we didn't have those EU fiscal rules. In the absence of those rules, we would still have to run our affairs in a sensible, prudent manner. And if we didn't have those rules, we would need another form of rules to ensure that we act in a sensible way. I think the second constraint, not only in terms of physical resources, when we're talking about ramping up capital spending, there is a capacity limit in terms of the construction sector. If we increase spending too dramatically, that will be reflected in higher tender prices, increase in prices, and reduced value of money for the Exchequer in terms of procuring. And this is what happened in the period to 2008. We ramped up investment, increased resource into an economy that was already fully employed, and we didn't necessarily get, in all cases, the better infrastructure. We got higher prices and an economy that became very imbalanced. So we need to be mindful of the constraints, both in terms of financial resources and also the physical capacity of the sector. So I just want to talk if this works. I'm pressing the arrow down. Oh, there we go. Oops. Remind me later. Okay. So I'll just go through one or two issues in the time allowed. In terms of the increase in capital spending, and I mentioned this, the existing plan, the current plans of the government are for a very significant increase in capital spending, almost over doubled compared to the period of the trough. Very significant commitment and increases now of double-digit increase in spending over the next year. 15% for 2018, higher again for 2019. So very significant increases in spending. The existing plans that we have involve very significant improvements in the stock and very significant improvements. And I've just put in some highlights there. People were at the Lewis Cross City, a fantastic project linked to the Grange Gorman development, really significant project for Dublin City, which we'll see in the autumn. School projects. Rory is here, and Rory can talk, if he gets a chance later, about the enormous improvement in the way in which we plan and build primary and secondary schools. An enormous change over the last number of years. And every year we are opening up new schools, we are refurbishing schools and improving the overall stock in the education system. And a variety of different pieces of infrastructure that have been improved. Park Queeve has been opened next week. We objected very strongly to that development on the basis that you should always keep Cork down, and now that they're building a new stadium for them, there'll be no stopping them. But that's opening at the weekend. I think a real issue, rather than focusing on the increase in spending, is what is the value for money proposition, the prioritisation. So project selection based on robust research. What are our real identifiable needs? What are the prospective demand? And do we have a proper evaluation of that demand? And do we have long-term planning and integration with the National Planning Framework? So we would like not just a debate about the increase in quantum, but a robust debate about the types of projects we should build and the type of sectors and the link with the spatial planning process. At the end of this year, the government, for the first time, will produce a 10-year long-term capital plan and the spatial plan together. And that's something that's been a problem in the past, that we had capital plans that were distinct and separate from a planning framework. And this will make an enormous difference in terms of how we plan and link our priorities with a proper spatial plan for the country. I'm not going to go through all these in detail, but in terms of the motorway network, and I hope people can see this graphic, as I mentioned, we have over 900 kilometres of motorway now, a very significant increase on what we had previously. There are large parts of the country that are well serviced, apart from the northwest and the northwest. Exactly. It's a remarkable map. This is for you, Joe. This map is really for you. So there are two major gaps. There is the issue about the M20 from Cork Limerick, and then there's access to Derry, Donegal, the northwest of the country. And it's very interesting to actually try set it out visually and see what it looks like. But this is an even better one again, I think. This is the travel time to the nearest motorway junction. So this is from 96, 2002 and 2011. So the furthest one over here on the right-hand side is the 2011 data. Blue, the darkest colours are furthest away from a motorway junction, and the green and yellow will be your proximity to it. So if you think, and this makes the point from the previous graphic probably in a more effective way, that if you see now in Ireland, the vast majority of people in our country now live within 15 minutes of a motorway junction, with the exception of parts of the southwest, as you can see, Dingle Peninsula, other parts of Kerry, and then the northwest. And so when we're looking at future investment in roads and the network, it's this type of analysis of the existing capacity which drives our assessment of what might be needed. In terms of Dublin, congestion in Dublin, this looks at traffic flows, and the way in which transport economists, engineers will look at this is that there's a free flow, the network is working well. If you have a breakdown in flow, this is reflected in the red lines and the yellow lines. Green is good here, but red and yellow is bad. And you can see this is the M50. There are parts of the M50 now, the red parts, which are underperforming dramatically, where you have significant stoppages. In effect, you have the car park effect, and the people who don't experience it, if you listen to the radio in the morning and the evening, you'll hear discussion about the M50. The major congestion within the Greater Dublin area is on the M50. It's not necessarily on the traditional radial routes from the north side of the city into the city centre or from the south side. It's on the M50. And the solution to this does not just involve an engineering solution, it's a spatial planning. It may involve issues around road pricing and congestion charging. It's not just build more road capacity. So there's a very significant set of issues the government will be facing with in terms of its future planning, and the Minister and the 10-year plan will set them out. I just want to very briefly talk about education, and just to give a sense of the extent to which demand analysis is impacting upon the planning going on within the Department of Education. This is the projected change in the number of primary school students. The number of primary school students will peak in 2018, and then you'll see a very significant fall from a peak of about 570,000 down to about 400,000 over this forecasting period. The secondary level, again, post-primary, a peak comes later, of course, but you can see the same effect. What's interesting, and this is where the planning, spatial planning is so important, this shows the change in total number of pupils between 2000 and 2016 by area. And you can see that some of the established city areas have seen a fall off or no increase in pupils, where the surrounding areas of Dublin and other places, you can see Fingal, Meath have a very significant increase. So the challenge for us is how to manage spatially and how to maximise the existing stock of school infrastructure and to ensure that we build the homes, the new homes of the future, 500,000 homes in the right places. And this brings me on to my final analysis. Fergal mentioned population trends. So we broadly accept the notion that population will go up by 1 million or thereabouts. Who knows? It could be higher, it could be lower. We need about 500,000 new homes. So the challenge is where do we build these new homes? In the past, we had unplanned population growth. We had a population growth which wasn't based on an integrated spatial plan. So this graph shows population trends from 91 to 2016. The red shows very strong population growth, and then if you go down to the blue, grey, white areas, its falls are very modest changes in population. What's happened is that the large towns and the hinterlands around our major cities have grown very, very quickly, and the populations of our core areas in our cities have not increased by as much, or in some cases they've actually declined, and rural areas have declined. So we need a spatial plan which develops more compact, spatially compact cities and grows strategic large towns and has a proper spatial plan for rural areas. And to give an example of what's happened in Dublin during this period from 91 to 2016, the red is large population growth, and you can see then the lighter colour shows decline in population. The population within the M50 and a lot of older established areas has actually declined. And within the M50, there are large sites prime for development, derelict sites, infill sites. So within Dublin, the challenge is to increase the population of Dublin, and population of Dublin will increase by a few 100,000, and we will build several 100,000 homes over the next 20 years. But to build them within the core M50 and to avoid the ribbon development that we had in the past. And this is the major strategic issue, planning issue that the government faces, this government and future government will face. Can we build in a more sustainable, compact fashion? So in conclusion, linking with the planning framework is critical. So from our perspective, we have a plan out to 21. The government is committed to resources, and we're now developing a long-term capital plan linked in with the spatial plan. And for us, it's not just about additional money, but it's about choosing the right projects and building the homes and communities of the future in the right places. Thank you very much.